This is Rise Together News. Some of you said yesterday's post melted your brain, so let's review it briefly. Yaldabaoth is described as an androgynous lion-faced serpent in several places, two of which you see quoted below along with references, and I'll let you read them on your own. Yaldabaoth creates man in his image. So originally, Adam starts out as an androgynous chimera, a snake body with a mammalian head, known across the world and in other cultures as a Naga. Interestingly, the Chinese goddess of creation, Nuwa, is also a Naga, with a snake-like body and a woman's head. Nagas are very popular in Hindu and Buddhist literature, as well as in Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and many other countries. Naga are often described as part divine and part human, able to shapeshift at will, sometimes appearing on land as human men and women during the day and returning to the water as Naga at night. Roger Spur from Mud Fossil University and Praveen Mohan both have interesting information on Nagas on YouTube, and I encourage you to visit their channels. Just put Naga in the search bar and there'll be enough there to keep you busy for a while. One thing you'll notice when you study mythology is that different cultures use different names for the same god or goddess. And sometimes a deity in one time period will appear in another story at a much different time. These are sometimes referred to as mirror gods. And one place we may see this is with Tiamat as Barbelo and Marduk as Jupiter or Yao. I'd like to focus on a creation story by a guy named Berosus, who was a Chaldean priest of Baal. Berosus wrote 3 books on the history of Babylon during the 3rd century BCE based on stories from indigenous people he knew in his role as a priest. But unfortunately, only a few fragments of his work have been translated or published. One fragment tells it like this. There was, he says, a time when the universe was only darkness and water, and in it were wondrous beings with particular forms who were able to engender other living beings. For men with 2 wings were born, and were other with 4 wings and 2 faces. Some of these had 1 body with 2 heads, male and female, and 2 sets of sexual organs, male and female. Further, there were other men with legs of goats and the horns of goats on their heads. Yet others had horses' feet, others had the body of a horse for their lower extremities, and human bodies for their upper body, which are the forms of hippo centaurs. Bulls were engendered with human heads, as were dogs with 4 bodies, who had fish tails on their hindquarters. There were also horses with dogs' heads, men and other creatures with the heads and bodies of horses, men with tails of fish, and all sorts of creatures who had the forms of all sorts of animals. In addition, there were fish, snakes, crawling things, and many other amazing creatures that had the appearance of 2 different animals combined. Their images are preserved, one next to the other, in the Temple of Bel. Over all these, a woman had control, named Amorka, who in Babylonian is named Talith or Tiamat. But in Greek, her name is translated as Thalassa, sea, or with the same value of the letters in the name Selene, or moon. While the world was in this state, Bel rose up against that woman and cut her in half. Out of the first half he made the earth, and out of the second the heavens. The animals who were in her were destroyed. All this, Berosus says, is an allegorical explanation for when all was water and only monsters were in it, the god cut off his own head, and the other gods mixed the flood of blood with earth and created men. Because of this, men have reason and share in the god's wisdom. But Bel, whose name is translated into Greek as Zeus, cut through the darkness and separated the sky and the earth from one another and established order in the universe. The monsters could not endure the strength of the light and were destroyed. Bel, however, as he saw an empty and barren region, gave an order to one of the gods to cut off his own head and mix earth with the flowing blood, and to create men and the animals that could breathe the air. Bel created the stars and the sun and the moon and the 5 planets. All this Berosus reported in his first book. Of course, most of you will recognize this story from the Enuma Elish, but it's brought a little closer to home when told from the perspective of an actual Babylonian priest, like the ones we read about in the Old Testament. Here's a passage from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 51, verse 44, in the Contemporary English Version. I will punish Marduk, the god of Babylon, and make him vomit out everything he gobbled up. The nations will no longer bring him gifts, and Babylon's walls will crumble. So here we have this fight, this power struggle going on between Marduk and Yahweh, 2 sides of the same coin, duking it out just like today. Daniel 14, 23 through 27 says, Now in that place there was a great dragon, which the Babylonians revered. The king said to Daniel, You cannot deny that this is a living God, so worship him. Daniel said, I worship the Lord my God, for he is the living God. But give me permission, O king, and I will kill the dragon without sword or club. The king said, I give you permission. Then Daniel took pitch, fat, and hair, and boiled them together and made cakes, which he fed to the dragon. The dragon ate them and burst open. Then Daniel said, See what you've been worshiping? There's an obvious parallel between the Daniel story and the Marduk account recorded in the Enuma Elish, where the winds controlled by Marduk burst Tiamat open, and the barley cake does the same thing in the Daniel story. In the Enuma Elish we read, Then advanced Tiamat and Marduk, the counselor of the gods. To the fight they came on, to the battle they drew nigh. The Lord spread out his net and caught her, and the evil wind that was behind him he let loose in her face. As Tiamat opened her mouth to its full extent, he drove in the evil wind, while as yet she had not shut her lips. The terrible winds filled her belly, and her courage was taken from her, and her mouth she opened wide. He seized the spear and burst her belly. He severed her inward parts. He pierced her heart. He overcame her and cut off her life. He cast down her body and stood upon it. When he had slain Tiamat, the leader, her might was broken. Her host was scattered. And the gods, her helpers, who marched by her side, trembled and were afraid and turned back. I could elaborate on this because there's so much here. But I think that's enough for now. I'm Cindy K. Courier. See you next time.